Welcome to C.A.C Global Solutions, your aircraft management and training partner. We provide aircraft management services, aviation training, aircraft acquisition support, auditing services, and regulatory industry insights for aircraft owners, operators, and aviation professionals worldwide through our newsletter, podcast, YouTube channel, and book, Introduction to Aircraft Management. We also support organizations and professionals with marketing strategies developed specifically for the aviation industry. To learn more about us, access our services and resources, or advertise with us, visit cacglobalsolutions.com. Coming up in this episode.
This way, he said, when you're driving your car, you're spending most of your time looking out the front of the car, looking through the windscreen, and you spend a little bit of your time looking in the small rear view mirror. He said, proportionally, one is larger than the other. So what safety management is trying to do is the same concept. It's trying to get us as an industry to look forwards, look for the hazards that are in front of us, as opposed to looking behind at what's happened previously. He said, we still need to learn from what's happened, but we need to broaden our horizon, view what's coming at us. And that's what ICAO, that's what EASA, what all the nations are trying to do with the SMS ICAO Annex 19 is to look for what might affect safety as opposed to just being compliant. Compliance is the bedrock of safety, and I think perhaps we overuse the word safety too much now, so everything's focused on safety, which is right. I totally understand that. Of course we've got to be safe, but if we start putting the word safety in front of every topic we talk about, we lose sight of the things that deliver that actual outcome of safety. So we've lost sight, I believe, at the moment of compliance. We've lost sight of understanding what we need to do to deliver safety, and we're focusing on the sharp, pointy end as opposed to the machine that delivers that.
You're listening to a preview of this interview. The full extended discussion, including downloadable audio, is available free in the C.A.C Aviation Knowledge Library. Visit cacglobalsolutions.com/aviation library and start exploring.
Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C Global Solutions. Welcome to our podcast, Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C. Brett and I today are going to talk about airworthiness management and the C.A.M.O concept. And we are going to do that with our guest, Paul White. Paul, welcome, and thank you for your time and for all the knowledge that you're going to share with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Good. So we are going to start immediately because we have a very long interview. We have a lot of things that we want to talk about with you. So first of all, how did you start in aviation? Why? What is wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, it's been in me since I was very young. My father was in the Air Force, and I had the privilege of going to RAF Akrotiri as a young boy, and being a schoolboy around an RAF base with fighter jets flying around, and spy planes weren't officially there, and the RAF Red Arrows coming out every winter to train. I was just totally surrounded by aviation. So from that very young age, I thought I need to be around aircraft. That's what interests me. So nice. It stayed with me, and then I had an interest for taking things apart and putting things back together again. And I thought I need to bring these two things together and become an engineer in the aviation world. So my first thought was to join the RAF, like my father. But because my birthday's at the end of the school year, I was technically too young to join up the Air Force when I left school. So I had to wait another year. So being 15, 16, you don't want to wait another year, do you? So I was tempted elsewhere, and eventually I joined British Airways as an apprentice. So I went into British Airways as an airframe engine apprentice. I went through their scheme for a few years, and then ended up on the line at Heathrow as a technician. So that's really where I started. Okay.
So how did you get into airworthiness management?
Yeah, that was by default, really, but by accident. It wasn't a plan. I don't think anybody in their early 20s has a plan. And I was just fed up with being cold, to be honest, out on the ramp on the line at Heathrow. And I was going through my licenses at the time. It was pre-EASA, so it was the BCAR licenses, license without type. So I was going through that process and being interviewed by the C.A.A. and going through that, and I could see what the projection was, how long it would take, and really what I was interested in was money. How much am I going to get paid when I get these licenses? And there was lots of talk in the early 90s about people losing license pay. It was a thing in those days. And then an advert popped up within the British Airways newspaper saying that they're looking for planning engineers, and it said it would suit an ex-apprentice, and they showed me the pay grade, and my eyes rolled with pound signs in them. I thought, well, okay, I can jumpstart my pay career by going into planning and get all the benefits that go along with that. So that's where it started, into the sort of the continuing airworthiness management world. Before we knew camos, I went into the planning department. Started looking at how it works behind the scenes, how we support the engineers.
Right.
So I'm sorry, this was the planning department within an airline.
Within British Airways, yes. Yeah.
British Airways. Okay. Interesting.
So I spent a few years there, and I had the opportunity to go into the regions. So I looked after Manchester, Birmingham, and Glasgow from a planning perspective for a while. So I managed to sort of spread my wings a little bit and see how it all gels together. So that really sort of got me stuck into that side of the business, really.
All right. So you've been in airworthiness management for quite a while then.
Yeah, I'm not going to say how many years, but quite a few.
Okay, listen. So, this is a very good point, because you saw the evolution of airworthiness management into CAMO and all of that. So would you like to explain what the CAMO is, and if you know when the concept was introduced and how?
Yeah, so through the 90s, I was actually overseas at the time. I moved over into the Far East, so I spent many years over there. But through that time, we were transitioning away from the BCAR, CAA rules into, initially it was the JAR, and then we went into EASA. EASA was born in the early 2000s. And it was really just bringing together what was known at the time as the back office support, the planning department, if you like, and the tech services and all those areas that would support the engineers in the daily operation. And so it evolved, and I think it was more of a desire to have an organizational concept. So to group these skills, these attributes together, and to put them under one banner and make one rule set around managing continuing airworthiness. So CAMO, Continuing Airworthiness Management Organization, it's all about managing the ongoing airworthiness. That lovely word airworthiness that everybody talks about, that hardly anyone can define. It's all about managing that and fundamentally keeping the aircraft in the state that the designers intended. And making sure we got those relationships with all the different players in the system, the designers, the operators, the maintainers, making sure that all comes together so the aircraft can remain as per that original design. And ultimately that should mean they're a long way to being as safe as possible. It's quite an integral piece, and it's quite powerful being part of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious, with the implementation or the rules that came to be regarding camos, I mean, it didn't just happen overnight that EASA went from no camos to camos, and there must have been some sort of progression and development. Can you share a little bit about how it progressed?
Yeah, so I mean, it's in a dim and distant past now. So and as I said, I was overseas when the transition happened. But yeah, there was quite a lot of noise about bringing these groups together under the one regulation. At the time, it was Part M. So Part M was introduced, and it looked at managing all the support activities for the operation. So looking at the defects of the aircraft, managing the maintenance program, managing reliability. Looking at the mass and balance, all the modifications, all the changes to the aircraft. So it's about centralizing that really and recognizing that is a key piece. And if we can do it cohesively, then we're going to end up with a better product at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So the transition was difficult. It was a mindset shift.
Yeah.
No, and I would argue we're still learning today. We're still learning more about it, 23-4 years down the line.
Yeah. No, I know. I've seen a number of areas where things are still somewhat in flux, particularly when you get into transition aircraft and you're dealing with lessors and third-party CAMOs and third-party maintenance and all of those things. But what I'm curious about, though, is in the progression of it. I mean, I know with SMS, for instance, in North America, or in Canada at least, it wasn't just a blanket. They implemented it across the board. It started with the airlines, and then it trickled down into, for instance, maintenance providers that provided services for the major airlines and things of this nature. So with the CAMOs, was that something that was just implemented with the airlines to begin with and then trickle down to general aviation, or was it just across the board?
No, not at all. In the EASA system, it was introduced into the operations in 2014. So it's been there a long time now, 12 plus years. It didn't really come into the CAMO construct until probably 4 or 5 years later. So it's quite a slow transition. And as we speak today, it's only just been introduced into the Part 145 and the design worlds. So it's taken a long time to transition the management system concept with a view to managing safety, or what people call SMS, to drag it out through the operations. Now, what was really interesting with that is the CAMO construct, especially for the main operators, the AOC, commercial operators. The CAMO construct is integrated into the operations. They're intrinsically linked. Two separate approvals, but intrinsically linked. So it's quite interesting that the management system concept was introduced into the ops world in 2014, but it didn't find its way to the CAMO world until 4 or 5 years later.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So with that, with the air operators having it intrinsically embodied, is that something that's written in regulation, or can they contract a third party to perform the continuing airworthiness management function for the air operation?
Well, I'm going to give you a classic consultancy answer now. It depends. If it's an air operations certificate, an AOC operator or a licensed air operator, then yes, that operator must also be approved to Part-CAMO. So that they must hold that within their organization. So an airline, for instance, British Airways, Virgin, all the big airlines, that they will have an operation approval, Part AOC, and they'll also have a Part-CAMO approval. If you go into the non-commercial world, non-special operations world, and also then start flying less other than complex motor powered aircraft. So there's quite a complex array of rules around this. But if you go to the pure end of GA, the private flyer with the small Cessnas, then it is possibility for that individual owner to contract the airworthiness management to another body. They don't have to have the approval themselves. So you can go from that end where you don't need a CAMO approval, you contract it, all the way up to the operators where it's embedded in the AOC approval.
Yeah. So with this, I would like to point out one thing and get your comment on it. When I started, I started in aviation when when this CAMO concept was starting to be introduced. And all I knew at that time was this Part M, and now there is a Part-CAMO, Part-CAO, Part whatever. Can you guide us through these differences and explain what they are about?
Yes, that's a really interesting one. And I think that still some people don't fully appreciate today. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We started off with just Part M. And the way the EASA regulations are made up, there's subparts within the parts. One of the subparts of Part M, subpart G, was the organizational requirements for the airworthiness management organization. So that was the CAMO effectively. So Part N, subpart G. And your approval then was known as a Part N, subpart G approval. All the other subparts of Part M look after different topics. So look after responsibilities, the continuing airworthiness tasks, defects, components, certifying, airworthiness reviews, which we had a topic on not so long ago. So it was all contained within Part M. When EASA were looking to introduce the management system construct, they only really wanted the management system construct to look at safety for the top end of the market, for the air operators, for the commercial airlines. So if they were to introduce it into Part M, it would have been very complex. subpart B of Part M is all about responsibilities, and there's a lovely table in the guidance material there that tells you if you're operating this for this reason, or if you're operating that aircraft for that reason. It tells you whether you need a camo or you can contract it out. If you then started overlaying safety management principles into that as well, and you can only need this if you're doing that, then it would have been too complex. So the decision was made to introduce Part-CAMO. So what they've effectively done is take the subpart G requirements out of Part M and called it Part-CAMO, and added the management system and safety management elements into Part-CAMO. So now if you're an AOC operator, you have to be approved to Part-CAMO. That's the organizational approval. And then that points back to Part M for all the technical elements, the technical requirements of managing airworthiness. So it still points back to subpart C for the continuing airworthiness tasks, subpart E for components, subpart I for the airworthiness review. So they're absolutely linked now. So CAMO hasn't replaced M. CAMO has effectively taken subpart G out, but only for the top end of the market, the AOC operators, special operators, or those operating complex motor-powered aircraft.
Okay.
Okay. So am I to understand then that their subpart G still does exist, and there are subpart G, or there are organizations approved to subpart G that perhaps would do third-party continuing airworthiness management for different private air operators?
Yes, it does still exist, but at the same time of introducing Part-CAMO, this is where it gets very complex now, a new approval was introduced, and this is pronounced in different ways. Part-CAO, Part-CAO, some people refer to it as, which is a combined airworthiness organization. So that was aimed at the lower end of the market, the private aviation, the non-complex aircraft. So it's the lighter aircraft. And it combines the airworthiness management and the maintenance requirements all under one approval. So yes, technically subpart G still exists, but most people are either Part-CAMO or Part-CAO approved these days.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I'm, of course, as we mentioned earlier, I'm of a North American aviation background, and I have experience with Transport Canada and the business aviation world and commercial world in Canada. But also in the FAA realm, we've both had experience managing FAA registered aircraft, where in North America, we don't have the official construct of a CAMO. But nonetheless, for an air operator, like you say, everything's intrinsic within the air operator certificate approval. So of course, they have all of the same aspects that are within the organization. It's a requirement. It's a requirement under the ICAO annexes, right? So so that's part of it. But when you get into private aircraft, that's where we see the biggest difference, because with Transport Canada, for instance, if you have a private complex aircraft, the operator still requires an approval of sorts, and that approval encompasses parts of airworthiness management. Like you've got to have an assigned, like for instance, what EASA world you refer to as a post holder. In Transport Canada world, they'd call it a person responsible. Whereas in the FAA world, that doesn't necessarily exist even to that degree. So a lot of people, I mean, the requirements are still there, but you're left to reading between the lines to see how it fits, right? Whereas to Annalisa's point, it's with the EASA model, it's much more structured, and it's basically thou shalt have this in place, and thou will do this, right? Where in Transport Canada, they say, yes, you have to have a person responsible, and you have to have an outline basically of how you'll manage it. But it's very much, it's not so much prescriptive as it is, well, it's not prescriptive. You define how you'll do it, and you identify how you'll do it, and then you do it. Whereas with the EASA, everything is spelled out on how you will do that within the CAMO construct, right?
Yes, to a degree. The EASA regulation, it's a lot more structured in what's required as per the outcomes, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the hows. The hows are very much left to the individuals within the organization, or as EASA would see it and the C.A.A. would see it, left to the organization to determine the detail. So yeah, I get there is this with the US, the FAA, it can be quite loose. You have individuals more involved and more responsible, but definitely within the EASA construct, it's more the organisation takes responsibility. What that really means is the nominated persons within the organisation supporting the accountable manager, they take responsibility. So it's more of an organisational group tasking really than individuals.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, if I'm not mistaken, this transition from Part M to Part-CAMO and Part-CAO happened just a few years ago. Am I correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Just before COVID, really, just before COVID hit was
Right.
the transition to Part-CAMO, Part-CAO. It's been talked about for many years before that. So yeah, it wasn't a surprise when it came. There was lots of consultation with the EASA. So yeah, it was well understood before it arrived, but the actual transition to it took some time. It was really the end of the teens when it came into effect.
So the Part M approval itself, the piece of paper, Part M is gone, and now you have or a Part-CAMO or a Part-CAO. Is that correct?
But yeah, the approval certificate is either a Part-CAMO approval or a Part-CAO approval, where Part M as a regulation still exists, and it's,
right.
Part-CAMO points you towards the Part M requirements.
All right. So do you feel that this transition has been completed, or there are still things ongoing?
Technically, yes, it's completed. The learning curve, we're still at the lower end of the learning curve with regards to it, and perhaps understanding the true responsibilities. And I think we're starting to see that now with the transition into the maintenance world, Part 145, how that works, especially the management system. And if you take the larger airlines where they're an operator, they're also Part-CAMO approved, they're also probably 145 approved as well. Getting that integrated management system is proving a challenge. So yes, technically the rules are in place. Have we as an industry fully adopted them yet and fully understood what they're trying to drive at? I don't believe so. I think we've still got a long journey.
If you enjoyed this discussion and would like access to more in-depth aviation interviews and resources, we invite you to join the C.A.C. Aviation Knowledge Library, a growing collection of extended interviews and practical aviation discussions designed for professionals who want to go beyond the headlines and explore topics in greater depth. Access is free. Visit cacglobalsolutions.com/aviation library and start exploring.